Hello there. Welcome into a Friday edition of the show. And yes, it is me. And unfortunately, a little bit late getting to the program as mechanical issues with planes and delays with the new plane and all of that fun stuff. I'll spare you all the details because this story of my travel difficulties does not end with me hanging out with flight attendants at the Phoenix Suns game. It just ends with me being late for the show. And for that, I sincerely apologize, but I have made it to Albuquerque Air Force women's basketball playing here tomorrow in the pit. Anybody else hear Chris Pratt sing that song every time? That fell into the pit from Parks and Rec? I do. But so we got a veritable cornucopia of sports topics. Hope you enjoyed a little bit of me from yesterday's show. But this is live and in color for the next 2 hours. And I'd love to get your interaction at 719 247 1313. We'll get into it here. We get the matchup that we all, I think, wanted more than anything else. And I said this when Canada was pushed to the brink by Czechia. It would have been a really fun story had Marty Necas and Czechia won. But then I'm watching the Canada-Finland game. And I guess, I don't know if it's, I have some sort of, soft spot in my heart for Czechia or maybe it's just because we're this close now. I would have been disappointed had Finland have won. And I would have been extremely disappointed if Slovakia would have won. So I think it was maybe just being on the cusp of getting the matchup that we have waited for after that epic Four Nations face-off final and all the hype going into it, the John Hamm commercials. It's like, we got to get this thing. And if Canada would have lost, then blood oath for the U.S. to tank so we can at least see. No, we want the U.S. to win gold. But we're going to get it. We're going to get Canada and the USA. And today they take two very different paths to this matchup on Sunday. Canada, there's something off with them. I wondered this the other day after they beat Czechia, because I watched that game and I thought, Canada doesn't look right. But once they locked in and rallied in that game and won, I'm like, okay, now Canada's locked in. And I thought it had something to do with, just blowing everybody out during the group stage. And I thought, okay, well, it's difficult to turn it on. Right? You're rolling over teams, and then the stakes get higher. You play better teams. It gets tighter checking, and it's a difficult thing to transition to. And look, we saw it with the United States against Sweden. I mean, it was kind of the same deal. But today we saw one team in the United States just run roughshod over Slovakia as they win 6-2. Goals by Larkin, Thompson, Hughes, Jack, not Quinn. The other Jack, Eichel, and Brady Tkachuk. 6 different goal scorers. They got 2 in the first and just never really looked back. Slovakia was never in that game. I do give credit to the Slovakian goaltender because I don't think it was on him. He ends up getting pulled from that game. That's one of those goalie pulls where it's just a coach grasping at straws trying to make something happen. Slovakia gave all the time and space in the world to Team USA. And while they're not maybe pound for pound as talented as Canada, they'll hurt you if you give them time and space. And that's what Slovakia did. And their goaltender had no chance. Just had no chance today. So you have the U.S. dominating, and you have not only Canada in a tighter contest. You have Canada going down 2-0 to Finland. And I had to laugh a little bit while I was watching the game, not like laugh because it's funny, laugh because it's making me think about the Avalanche power play. I am way too obsessed with the Avs power play right now, apparently. But so they get Finland's first goal comes from a designed play off the faceoff to none other than Mikko Rantanen, who is part of the reason not having him is part of the reason why the Avs power play has gotten worse. And then Canada goes on a power play with Makar and McKinnon on the ice, and Canada gives up a shorthanded breakaway goal to make it 2-0. It's like that right there encapsulates the Avalanche power play this season. Not having Mikko Rantanen to be able to do what Finland did with him on their first goal, and then despite having Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon on the ice, you give up a shorthanded breakaway goal the other way. But in the end, and Mikko Rantanen talked about this after the game, you just can't hold up against this talent that Canada has. I mean, it's just so incredibly difficult because they keep coming at you in waves, even without Sidney Crosby. They keep coming at you in waves. Still, even with their top six, McDavid centering one line, Nathan McKinnon the other, even that feels like they're coming at you in waves, and they camp out in the attacking zone, and then they just bludgeon you with shots. And Finland just could not withstand that. And so Canada gets it back tied up at 2, and I'm like, oh, here we go again. I got to take to Twitter, another 3-on-3 overtime to decide the most important hockey games on planet Earth. But no, Nathan McKinnon says we're not messing around with that 3-on-3 nonsense. He has a window between UC Saros and the post that is roughly the width of a hockey puck. And Nathan McKinnon fits it through there with 32 seconds left in the game to put Canada in front. And they reviewed it not because there was a real question of whether the play was offside. It was just Finland saying, to heck with it, let's just give it a shot. The celebration from Team Canada on the bench was, I mean, they went berserk when the call was upheld, except for Nathan McKinnon. Nathan McKinnon, as always, stoic, chewing on the end of his mouthpiece, ready for the next shift out on the ice. I mean, somebody's got to get a picture of that. That picture goes pretty hard. All these players from Canada going nuts, and Nathan McKinnon like, yeah, I do this. Have you not tuned into the Avalanche games? I do this quite a bit. But I look, I warned this at the beginning of the tournament because Canada was looking so, as my kids would say, OP. And the U.S. had their struggles. And I said, look, you can't look at the way these two teams play against a completely different set of opponents and truly glean how a matchup between the two will go. And I still believe that, even though now it's more it's my light went out, as it's more about the U.S. looking better than Canada is going into the gold medal game. You still can't do that. You still have to take the matchup between these two teams. And the key for the United States is just going to be getting it out of their own zone. The lesson that they will learn as if they needed to learn it. They probably already know this. But they're going to see it in the second and the third period. Finland just fighting for their lives with their backs to their own goal. That can't happen on Sunday. The U.S. has to find a way to limit Canada in the offensive end. And we'll see what Sidney Crosby's status is for Sunday. He skated privately today, just couldn't give it a go. And a lot of talk about the separation between these two teams happen to be about the depth in scoring that Canada has, where they throw out basically the best third-line center in the history of hockey in Sidney Crosby. Well, if you don't have him, Nick Suzuki ain't bad either, but he's not Sidney Crosby. So one of the big advantages that Canada would have in a matchup, the depth in scoring, is going to be lessened a little bit with if Sidney Crosby cannot go. And then even if he can, you wonder, what percentage he's going to be at. So some of that depth that Canada has that worries you if you're a fan of Team USA maybe doesn't worry you as much. But the fact of the matter still is you go down line by line and it's like Canada has the two best players in the world in McDavid and McKinnon. They have the best defenseman in the world, one of the best defensive defensemen in the world in Devon Taves. But then after that, here's, Jacob Slavin on the defensive side, Zach Werenski, Quinn Hughes. And then the forwards, you have, Eichel and Hughes. So the top line talent, the first couple of slots go to Team Canada. But I think as you move beyond that, I think the U.S. matches up very well. And I've said that Bill Guerin built this team to match up, to be kind of the counter to Canada. And the biggest one is not including Jason Robertson. He's not trying to match Canada goal for goal. He's trying to limit some of what Canada can do by highlighting the strengths of the United States, the fact that their blue line is deeper. Their goalie is better. Connor Hellebuck is better than Jordan Binnington. Now, I'll give it to Jordan Binnington. He's been clutch. And you certainly see the contrast of Jordan Binnington with a middling hockey team in the St. Louis Blues versus playing with Team Canada. And remembering how dependent sometimes goalies are on the guys in front of them. But Binnington's been clutch. But I'll roll with Connor Hellebuck. And I'll roll with the depth that the U.S. has on the blue line. But when you have the two best players on planet Earth, Cale Makar is somewhere shortly thereafter. When we talk about this, when it comes to, playoff series in the NHL or the NBA, who has the best player in this series? Or in this case, in this game? Well, Canada does. Well, what after that one? Well, it's still Canada. It's a fascinating matchup. But look, these teams are not that much different than the Four Nations, and we got an all-time classic in that final. It's just, can the U.S. get the timely goal to win this thing like Canada got last year with Connor McDavid and got even today with Nathan MacKinnon? I think ultimately in the end, that's what it's going to come down to. Who's going to come up big in that moment? Last 2 minutes of a period, first 2 minutes of another. A team gets a 2-goal lead. Who's going to score that next goal? Both teams have plenty of players capable, but that's what Sunday is going to come down to. So it'll be the U.S. and Canada bright and early, just after 6 a.m. on Sunday. Normally, that would worry me, but considering that I've been up at 4:30 and 3:30 the last couple of days, I'm ready to go. I'm going to keep this sleep schedule and watch Canada and the U.S. live. Take your thoughts. Canada with the nail biter 3-2. Nathan McKinnon with the game winner over Finland, and the U.S. blows out Slovakia 6-2. 6 different goal scorers, and it will be Canada and the U.S. just like on the women's side, on the men's side, Sunday at 6 a.m. 719-24-7-1313. Coming up next, the Nuggets in action last night. Not a great start to their post-All-Star schedule. We'll talk about it next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Still working on the lighting here in my hotel room in Albuquerque. So sorry, dark shadowy figure on your in your social media feed. Uh, so we'll talk about the Nuggets here momentarily. First, I want to get to some breaking news as just everything is just today. Uh, my microphone's like spinning. Um, Breaking news out of the Air Force Academy as the Academy has announced they have parted ways with men's basketball coach Joe Scott. Both parties released a statement. If you had not been following this, it was quite a while ago, actually, that Joe Scott was basically put on leave because of an internal investigation. And I think the people who follow the program, even without like the most forthcoming institution when it comes to these kind of things, you could kind of surmise maybe what this was about. And the quote, the statement from athletics director Nathan Pine kind of highlights exactly what this was all about, and why Joe Scott will no longer be the head coach of the Air Force Falcons. He says, Coach Scott's passion for the game of basketball has long been evident in his competitive and direct coaching style. See right there. It was this coaching style that guided Air Force basketball to some of the program's most memorable achievements during his initial tenure at the Air Force Academy. This is a different day, and now is the right time for a new voice and a new approach to drive the culture and success of the men's basketball program, aligned with the Air Force Academy's mission of forging leaders of character developed to lead in our Air Force and Space Force. We thank Coach Scott for his 10 years of service to the Academy and wish him and his family well. Joe Scott did issue a brief statement that the school put out along with that comment from Nathan Pine. Says, I thank Nate Pine for his leadership. The Air Force Academy gave me my first head coaching opportunity, and I am forever grateful. We will always be fans of Air Force basketball. So, and I said this when the news initially came down of Joe Scott being put on leave, or whatever the official word was initially, that his coaching style is a bit abrasive. If you watch Air Force men's basketball games, you see Joe Scott, like, not uncommon to many head coaches. I mean, Joe Scott does not rise to the level, to me, of Dan Hurley in terms of the intensity and the histrionics on the sideline. But if we're making the Dan Hurley, I know different levels of college basketball, but just to make that comparison, Dan Hurley is actually a great example, because when UConn is becoming a dynasty and winning back-to-back national titles, he is a mad genius. And when UConn was losing, like they did the following year after they went back-to-back, now it's too much in the eyes of the general public. Right? If you're going to coach in that way, to Nate Pine's point about the day and age we live in, and we can get into that bigger conversation about the day and age that we live in, but the fact of the matter is we're here. And if you're going to coach in that way, the results have to follow. And the results weren't following for the Air Force men's basketball team. And look, they got a mountain to climb in that Mountain West Conference, even with the new look Mountain West starting next year. This is going to be a difficult rebuild, and in an era where you can't rebuild if you're at the Air Force Academy, right? The idea of rebuilding in college basketball, those means are not available to the Air Force Academy. They can't just dip into the portal and bring in a guy or two to help put them in the right direction. And as you well know, the Air Force Academy is not, let's just put it this way, Ryan Kaufman never got any letters from the Air Force Academy when he was in high school bidding for his tuition, although the tuition is paid for. But you get my point. Like, it's not the easiest school to recruit to. So this is a long process. And initially, the thought behind bringing Joe Scott back was he knows how to win at an academy. He did it. It was the right hire for that moment. A little bit of a different style than Dave Pilipovich was. A little bit more fire and brimstone than Coach P was, and that's natural when you're switching coaches. You kind of tend to look for somebody who's a little bit different. But it was the right call at the time to bring in somebody that knows the academy, which is incredibly important. And I see it on the women's side. They didn't look far. They went one chair over from Chris Gobrecht for Stacey McIntyre, who had spent almost a decade on the bench before becoming a head coach at the academy. She knows the academy. Joe Scott knows the academy. It was the right hire at the time. The program needed a push. But in the end, Joe Scott kept pushing, and it didn't go anywhere. And I would expect the next head coach of at the Air Force Academy to be different than Joe Scott. Now, the statement doesn't say exactly what he did, but again, you can read between the lines a little bit that coaching style just was not resonating. And I said this at the time the news came down, and I'll say it again here. My interactions with Joe Scott have been amazing. I love in the few time, I don't get as much time as my colleague Jim Arthur does to interact with Joe Scott. But when I have, I've always enjoyed his company, always enjoyed talking basketball with him. And he's a passionate guy. He wanted to win at the Air Force Academy. He was excited. I interviewed him the week he got hired back and talked to him, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. And he felt like he could get things pointed in the right direction. And I think everything that Joe Scott did I think he did it to try and get this thing pointed in the right direction. I think his heart was absolutely in the right place. But there's just a fine line that you walk when you coach that way, that if the results aren't there, then it's clear that your program's not responding to your coaching style and maybe a different one is necessary. We see it all the time in college athletics. And look, you can see what has happened since Joe Scott was removed from his post, and the results have been the same. So we'll see where they go. I think that they're going to, my guess is it will be, I don't know how wide of a net they cast when they hired Stacey McIntyre on the women's side. But they had a great candidate in-house endorsed by the outgoing head coach that had turned the women's basketball program at the academy completely around. It wasn't a difficult decision for Nate Pine at that time. Stacey was the obvious choice. I don't know that there's an obvious choice there. And I know some of those assistant coaches, and they're great basketball men. I would imagine this to be a more expansive search, or perhaps some more options on the table. The choice is not as clear, I think, on the men's side as it was on the women's side. And I'll see where we'll all see where Nate Pine goes with this. But I think the most important thing in the meantime is that it brings closure to this. And I know nothing is mutual in this world, but it is being characterized as a mutual parting of the ways. Both parties are speaking highly of one another. And I think, again, I'm not around the team like Jim Arthur is, and I'm sure he will speak on this as soon as tomorrow during his broadcast. But I got to imagine that there will be a bit of a weight lifted off of the shoulders of the staff, the players, having closure in all of this and being able to just move on with the rest of this season, see if they can't catch lightning in a bottle and end the season on a high note. And then Nate Pine, as I know he will be casting a wide net and will be looking again for the right person. I think Joe Scott at the time was the right guy. I really do. And the results don't back me up, but I think he was. And that's all you can do is make the decision that makes the most sense in the moment. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Nate Pine has another decision on his hands when it comes to the Air Force men's basketball program, and we'll see what comes of that once this season has come to an end. But the breaking news of the afternoon is that the Air Force Academy and Joe Scott have mutually agreed to part ways. And the search for a new head coach, I would imagine, begins immediately. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts, Air Force basketball fans. Want to hear from you. What do you think, especially the longtime ones that have been through both eras of Joe Scott? Your thoughts very much welcome on this Friday. Coming up next, we'll continue with this Friday edition of Drive Time Sports on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Tonight, don't forget Air Force hockey taking on Army. 7:05 puck drop on Extra Sports 1300. The first of two meetings this weekend between those two rivals. Want to get to one text that I got in. So because I was late, I mean, this is probably more information than you need, but because I had travel issues getting down here to Albuquerque, we re-aired the first hour of yesterday's show, in which I talked about the women's gold medal win over Canada, and I wanted to read this text that I received in reaction to that. Said, I agree with you, Ryan. That women's hockey game was something special, and if you missed it, whoever you are, and then you just missed it, it was everything you hope for when it comes to Olympic hockey for the U.S., and if at the end of that game, goosebumps and the hair wasn't standing up on your arms, then you just don't get it. I went out personally and bought a USA hockey jersey, and I've been wearing it loud and proud. I had to watch it over and over just because it was so awesome. It was a great win. It was a great win yesterday for the U.S. women, and for it to be Hillary Knight who scores the game tying goal, and then Megan Keller in overtime, just phenomenal stuff. And beating Canada ain't too shabby either. That makes it all the better. But like I said yesterday, this is why we watch the Olympics, and all the numbers are coming in, and it's the most watched Olympics in the history of mankind, or whatever it is. That we just love this stuff, even if we don't fully understand all of these sports, or if we don't watch all these sports on a regular basis. But yesterday was just in general, yesterday was awesome, because you didn't just have the U.S. women's hockey team. You had Michaela Schifrin snapping her 8 race losing streak, if you want to call it that, in the Olympics. That was the day before. And then you had Amber Glenn. What a phenomenal story. She didn't win the medal, but for her to come back after a disaster in the first half of that competition, and she was flawless. And the Olympic spirit, as cliche as it is, it's a real thing. And so many of our U.S. athletes have it. Very cool stuff. And now we get maybe another moment coming up on Sunday as the U.S. men take on Canada. 719-24-7-1313. So hoping to leave the tanking conversation in this week, but I got to bring this up when it comes to the NBA, because I heard something, and I'm bringing in producer Ray Dominguez on this because he's a big NBA guy, and I would love to get his thoughts on this. So Ray and audience, are you ready? Are you ready, Ray, to hear this? Okay, so there have been we are in there are no bad ideas area, apparently, because some ridiculous ideas have been thrown out, most of them by the league. Here's one I heard. So you rotate division by division for the top 6 picks every year. So it would be like, let's say, for instance, this coming up year, it would be the Nuggets division that would get 1 through 6. Now, there might be a team tanking in that group, but just think about it. You would have reverse order of finish, or maybe you'd have a lottery. I didn't hear how they would do it, but essentially this year, the top 6 picks would be in some order: Denver, Minnesota, OKC, Utah. Who am I missing from the division, right? But anyway, you get the point. And then next year it would be the Spurs, Houston, Dallas, etc. And then the next year it would be the Knicks and the Celtics. And just keep continuing rotating. And also, too, it would be the entire draft order is fixed. So one division would get 1 through 6. The next division would get the next group, and then the next, and then the next. What do you think about that? Portland, thank you. Right. So essentially, you would be this year would remain. Let's take the scenario that the Northwest Division is up this year, and what a year it would be to think of AJ Bansta or uh, Cameron Boozer, or I'm kind of souring on the kid from Kansas, the Peterson kid, because he's load managing himself in college. But this is a generational draft, and you would still have Utah tanking, right? They would still do that. Maybe Portland would not be going for it as much as they are this year. Nuggets play Portland, by the way, tonight. And then the Nuggets would end up with maybe one of these guys. And then OKC, it's like OKC's going to end up with some stud anyway because of all the picks they own. Um, but I'm sensing from you, and it would be very clear. Like you would, I think it's not a fix for tanking. It's a way to target tanking to say, all right, if you're going to tank, you got to plan around this because it does Utah no good to tank this year if they're locked into a pick in the 20s. But here's the thing, but you brought up something. Are you if I told you that this is possible for not just the NBA but every sport, would you be down for it? Cuz you just said that you don't like the idea that a team is penalized for going for it, and I think it's not so much the Nuggets fan in you that's saying that. I think it's the Steelers fan in you that's saying that. I think you're saying because my organization is never going to tear it down fully. I would like I'd at least like to get a decent pick out of it, and get them rewarding Pittsburgh for trying. I think so, and I think that would what you would have to do in the NBA is you would have to eliminate pick protection, and I talked about that yesterday. They should just do that anyway. But now it would be a situation where teams aren't blindly giving away all of their picks because they know now in 3 years they're going to get one of the top picks, and they'd be crazy to give away one of those. Whereas this year, if you were the division that where you were locked into the 20s, then you would be perfectly willing to trade your pick. So it would be the freewheeling, basically what OKC has taken advantage of for the last few years. That would be curbed as well because there would be teams saying, no, we're guaranteed to have a great pick this draft. I'm not giving that pick up. You can have the pick after or the pick before, but you can't have that one. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you can't hold like who are the players that are that are are you saying that Laurie, like using the Jazz as an example, are you saying that Laurie Markkinen should refuse to come out of a game? Oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. Well, now you're getting into load management, which isn't which can be like tanking, but isn't because tonight you just told me that Jamal Murray is questionable. That feels like they're going to load manage him tonight. So that's more of a load management thing than a tanking thing because a lot of the teams that are tanking are just flat out not good. And the players are still trying. The players on the court are still trying. Um, I don't know how I feel about this. I was trying to rank them. So the worst, I know the worst idea is going soccer style and just allowing these college players to pick where they go. That's the worst idea. Abolishing the draft is the worst idea. I still contend that my idea is the best one. I know, shocker, of eliminating the draft and just awarding picks in reverse order. That way, the hope is that a team like Utah that is so blatantly tanking just gets the number one pick that they're going to these great lengths to get, and then they get the player that they need to not be showing back up at the top of the draft the next year. And Dallas is a great example. Like Dallas is going to be in the lottery, but they're not, other than the shenanigans, they're not going to get one of the top picks in the draft. So this is somewhere in the middle. I think flattening the lottery odds is probably this might be the second best idea to mine. Now that I'm saying it, because I don't like the flattening of the draft, the lottery odds as a curtailing tanking. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. But I understand the thought process behind it, and just saying if we can't stop tanking, at least we can contain it by saying you're only going to get a top pick, that you're going to get a top pick in this particular year. So the other years where you're drafting later, there's no point in tanking. It feels quite radical. And I don't and I don't know that the NBA needs to go too radical with this. I think there's a blueprint in the NFL that is just the right way to go about it. Tournament style tournament style I like better than in a world with the NBA Cup. I like the tournament style. That's another one of yours. The tournament style I like better than this. But I thought it was interesting. It was thought provoking what I had heard, but I like yours better. As they tend to do, right? Yeah. 719 1313. Take your thoughts on that. What's your best idea? Welcome in. Glad to have you on this Friday, coming your way live from Albuquerque, where it is incredibly windy here. In fact, my landing of my plane at the Sunport here in Albuquerque, it was I give props to the pilot. Pilot crushed it, but man, the wind here down in the 505 is brutal. But I'm inside, so it's not as bad. But getting the 30 seconds from me walking out of the Sunport to get in my Uber was something out of the Wizard of Oz. But made it here and ready for a battle in the pit tomorrow between Air Force and New Mexico. Your thoughts very much welcome on this Friday, as they are every day. 719-247-1313. If you're watching the show on social media, like Ryan just hit me up with a comment, and I'll get to that, Ryan, here shortly. You can just drop a comment right on the live stream, and I'll be able to display it on the broadcast here. Ray Dominguez is in studio. Because I got in a bit late here today, let's just roll right into the next topic of the day, and that happens to be last night's Nuggets game where they fall to the LA Clippers 115-114. Now let's reverse engineer this thing and how we got there. So the Denver Nuggets, stop me if you've heard this one before. The Denver Nuggets down by 3 with virtually no time left, and Jamal Murray is able to draw a foul from behind the three-point arc. Just 3 free throws are all that separates the Nuggets from an overtime game. And then this happened. That was Jason Kosmicki on the call for Altitude Radio. You heard it right here on Extra Sports 1300, or on Extra Sports 1300. Still working through. We're on 2 radio stations. Jamal Murray did it again. He did this against Detroit. Different free throw. That game, it was the second one, not the third one. But it really is bizarre because there is no one on the Denver Nuggets that I would trust more at the free throw line, not even number 15, than Jamal Murray. And twice in a season would be crazy for Jamal Murray to miss game on the line free throws. He's done it in a month twice. So the Nuggets now have lost their last 4 one-score games. They are the antithesis of the Denver Broncos right now. They are winning no one-score games. Here's Nikola Jokic on why that might be. Yeah, I think most Nuggets fans would hope that it changes. To Jokic's point, last night, Jamal Murray misses a free throw. The last one possession game that the Nuggets lost, Tim Hardaway. What do you think of when you think of Tim Hardaway? 3-pointers. He misses a 3. That would have answered James Harden's game-tying 3. The last matchup with Detroit, Julian Strother misses a 3 with about 30 seconds left. Why Julian Strother is taking a clutch 3-pointer, I have no idea. But he missed one. And then the Detroit game before that, Jamal Murray, as I mentioned, misses the second of his 3 free throws, has to miss the third, and the Nuggets aren't able to get the shot. So Nikola Jokic is right. And even if you throw in the shot that Jamal Murray has taken in the Detroit game and the one last night, they're not making those. But also, he's not making his free throws. I suppose you could chalk this up to it being a make-or-miss league, right? That's what they say about the NBA all the time. And the Nuggets in these close games lately haven't been making shots. But I prefer, as I tend to do, to take a slightly different path. And I am heartened to find out that the head coach of the Denver Nuggets is kind of with me on this. Here's David Adelman after the game. Two things that I want to touch on that David Adelman said. Let's start with that last thing. The Nuggets are committing way too many fouls in the crunch time of these games. That's what David Adelman is referring to when it comes to discipline. Last night, Bruce Brown commits a foul on Benedict Mathurin with 35 seconds left in the game. Can't do that. Can't commit a foul at that stage of the game. The second of the 2 Detroit games, Peyton Watson makes a great defensive play, blocks a shot, but Denver can't get the rebound, and then Peyton Watson ends up fouling the guy that gets the rebound, which puts Detroit ahead. And then you throw on top of it James Harden's shot. And look, in isolation, James Harden's a shot maker, and he made a shot. But when you put it with these other games, you have a foul that puts the Clippers on the line. You don't force them to beat you. You put them on the line. You give up a three-pointer to James Harden. You commit a foul against Detroit. And then the previous Detroit matchup, you let Tobias Harris knock down a 16-footer. Tobias Harris, the guy from the commercials with Boban. That dude is still in the league, and he's burying the Denver Nuggets. So last night it's discipline. But the common thread between all of these games that I look at, because I can dismiss, as crazy as it is, that Jamal Murray missed 2 crunch time free throws in a relatively short span of the season. I'll still bet on Jamal Murray on the free throw line when it matters the most. Okay? But when the other side of the court is putting the Nuggets in a position where they have to create those shots, to Nikola Jokic's point, that's more troubling, because that's exactly what I was discussing on the show yesterday. The thing that has to get better with the Denver Nuggets in these final 30-ish games, they got to be a better defensive team. And that means not giving up jumpers to Tobias Harris. And it also means not defending without fouling with under a minute to go. So what I looked at last night was the fact that the Denver Nuggets could not get a stop down the stretch against a team Like, it would be one thing, like the Cleveland game. It's one thing when it's James Harden making the shot. It'd be one thing if it was Kawhi, if I'm talking about Kawhi Leonard hitting the shot that buried the Denver Nuggets. They're fouling Benedict Mathurin. And no disrespect to Benedict Mathurin, but he's not Kawhi Leonard. You can live with Shea or James Harden or Cade Cunningham or Victor Wembanyama making a shot. Because in this league, offense is going to be defense. Great offense is going to be great defense. But when it's Tobias Harris, when it's Dennis Jenkins, when it's Benedict Mathurin, you can't be giving up points to those guys in crunch time. And the fact of the matter is, right now, the Denver Nuggets are just not a good defensive team. And their only hope is to get Aaron Gordon back. And to a lesser extent, getting Peyton Watson back. They are missing, for a team that has never been known as a great defensive team. Even when they won a title, they were not a great defensive team. They were middle of the road in the NBA in defense. But you know what the Nuggets were? A very good situational defensive team. Meaning, if they need a stop in crunch time, they can get one. They're, for 47 minutes of the game, they're just going to try and outscore you with Jokic and Murray, and back then it was Porter and so on and so forth. They're just going to try to match you shot for shot, which they can do. And it's going to, their offense is going to keep them in the game. But what the Nuggets did during their title run, they got stops when they needed it. They bent throughout the game, but they didn't break in the key moments. And right now, over these last 4 one-score games, the Nuggets are breaking in crunch time on the defensive end of the floor. And that is exactly what must change if this team is going to win a title. It is their biggest flaw, and it could be their fatal flaw come postseason time. Now, in the big picture, they need Aaron Gordon to beat OKC in a 7-game series, to beat San Antonio, to beat Minnesota. They need Aaron Gordon. But what's, I think, a little disheartening about last night is the Clippers are not the Thunder. They're not the Spurs. They're not the Rockets. They're not the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the one guy on the court that could play for those other teams isn't the one hurting you. This team, as currently constructed, should be able to find a way to get a stop against the Clippers. And that's what's different, because you look at the other games that they lost. Detroit twice. Detroit might be the best team in the NBA right now. Right? Even you look at the Knicks game. That wasn't a one-possession game, but that they ended up losing a close one in overtime. Without Aaron Gordon, you can kind of understand it. But last night's a night where the Nuggets, is currently constructed, should be able to find a way to get a stop. And they didn't. And here's the other part of last night that David Adelman mentioned there. We need, and I'll put it under the same in the same column as Jamal Murray missing free throws with the game on the line. Nikola Jokic has been not short of the height of his powers. By Nikola Jokic standards, he has been bad. And the numbers aren't going to show it, because you're going to see 17 points, 17 rebounds. It sounds like the drive-through skip from I think he should leave. 17 rebounds, 17 assists, 17. Nikola Jokic is going to cover up his mistakes and his shortcomings because he's just that good. But the fact of the matter is the guy missed every three-pointer he took last night. And he is turning the ball over a lot. I hate to lend credence to KD's burner account, but we need to talk about the Jokic turnovers. Since he came back, and maybe it's just that we're not, or we aren't, he's not used to having 3 weeks off. Maybe even for the best player in the world, he needs some time to get back from a lengthy injury. But that's the other part. The Nuggets defense, there's the shock of Jamal Murray missing the free throw. Yeah. But really where they lost that game was on the defensive end in crunch time. And why that game was a game was because Nikola Jokic wasn't nearly what he normally is. And LA doesn't have Zubac anymore. That dude's in Indiana. The Murray thing, the Jokic thing, they can be reasons why the Nuggets are losing now. But I can't imagine that there'll be reasons why the Nuggets get bounced in the playoffs. The thing about the defense and the fouling is what could cost them in the postseason. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Nuggets loss last night to the LA Clippers. You just got to be fair, right? It doesn't mean Nikola Jokic somehow isn't still the best player in the world, but there's this trepidation about criticizing him. And it's like the dude flat out hasn't been very good since he came back from injury for best player in the world standards. I wouldn't expect it to continue, but you got to call it like you see it. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, why this may be the best winter games ever for the United States. Ray said something during the break that I get it. Um, he said, look, people are going to look from the outside and say that we're spoiled because Nikola Jokic can put up 17 points and 17 rebounds in a game, and we can sit here and find ways to poke holes in it. And yes, it's true that we are spoiled. And we are spoiled as Colorado sports fans because we have two of the best players in their sport going on at the same time. Oh, and also Cale Makar. I mean, you want to talk about spoiled? Look at what's going on in the Olympics. Look at how Avalanche players are doing. They're all Avs guys. Arturi Lehkonen with the overtime winner last night or yesterday. Nathan McKinnon with the winner today. You have Marty Necas, who is carrying Czechia. Brock Nelson played phenomenal for Team USA early in the tournament. Those are all Avs players. But two things can be true. We can be spoiled that we get to watch a player of Nikola Jokic's caliber, but we can also understand that when you are the best player in the world, you are held to a certain standard. And I don't think his game last night, or quite frankly, any of the games since he's come back, or at least most of the games, there are a couple really good performances in there, but it's just this stretch since he's come back has not been Jokic-like. And the fact of the matter is, if Jokic is not playing Jokic-like, the Nuggets aren't winning a title. They got Minnesota, they got Wemby, they got KD, they got OKC. And then on the other side of the bracket, they might have the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum. Like, they need the best player in the world to win a title. But like I said, I don't expect Nikola Jokic to be off of his game in the playoffs. In fact, I expect him, along with Jamal Murray, to raise their game because they always do. But the way he played last night was a reason why that game came down to the final stretch. And then the more important thing is the Nuggets defense is not great. This coming in from Ryan as promised when it comes to Sunday's gold medal game. Says, I'm hoping for gold, but will be more happy if 0 Avs players get injured. That is the tightrope that we walk, right? And Mark Cuban was the brave soul that said what many of us think, right? He said he didn't want Dirk to play in the Olympics because it doesn't benefit the team that he has more vested interest in. And I think that we all kind of feel that way to a degree. But it's just a matter of, do we actually not want these guys to play? And looking at remember the Olympics, the summer games. And I know Nikola Jokic wasn't on Team USA, but how much joy there was watching Nikola Jokic play in the Olympics. I think it's worth it. And I will say that hockey culture is a little bit different. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, hockey culture is one of the reasons why those of us who love hockey love it. And it's not the same culture as basketball in all the best ways. And I think what Ryan's getting to is, Avs fans are hoping that Nathan McKinnon, Makar, Taves, and Brock Nelson come out of Sunday's game unscathed. But I don't think, and I don't want to put words into Ryan's mouth, I don't think you. I think you take that risk, right? I mean, you hope, but no one is suggesting that you would just prefer Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, and Brock Nelson to not and Devon Taves to not play. We want to see the latest iteration of the Canada-US rivalry. And it's not just the four nations. Yes, this group of players dates back to the four nations, but if Sidney Crosby plays, let's not forget what he did to Team USA. You want all those players in the game, and you want them to stay healthy, and you want Team USA to win. You got a lot of wants coming up on Sunday, but even with the risk, it's worth it because this is awesome. Sunday is going to be awesome. And it's because 4 Avs players are 4 of the best players for their respective countries. And you want them on that ice. Speaking of the Olympics, I mentioned this yesterday, and it's aged ever so much more poorly since. I just felt, and it was the tone that Lindsey Vohn's injury set. Right? There was such disappointment, not in Lindsey Vonn, but about what happened with Lindsey Vonn. And then shortly thereafter, Michaela Schifrin had her struggles. And that's 2 of the premier U.S. athletes that are falling short on this stage. And maybe 2 of the athletes, especially Schifrin. I don't know how high expectations were for Lindsey Vonn, but your expectation was at least to watch her ski. And you really didn't get that. These Olympics started on such a sour note for Team USA. But there's a reason why this competition goes on for 2 weeks. And with Alex Pereira's gold medal today in the skiing halfpipe, Team USA has won the most gold medals that they have won in any Winter Olympics ever. So born out of as disappointing of a start to these Milano Cortina games as you could imagine is the most successful Winter Olympics that we have seen. And we all can understand that the Winter Olympics are not our Olympics. We're a summer games country. But the fact that we've picked up 10 gold medals and we got at least one more shot on Sunday for 11. And I think bobsleigh or bobsled. Bobsleigh is monobob or the singular. I think team bobsled might be. Team USA fell short today in the semifinals, so they're going to play Canada of all countries for bronze in women's curling. But we at least know we got a shot for 11 to add to the most successful Olympic Games, Winter Games that we've ever had. But I wonder, and this is a conversation ultimately for Monday, because the last impression of the Winter Games is going to be Sunday's gold medal game between the U.S. and Canada. Will this Olympics be remembered as probably it should be as the most successful Winter Games Team USA has ever had? Or will the disappointment stick out? Started with Lindsey Vonn. I mean, we could have, and I'm not trying to put this in the atmosphere, but I just got to go through all the machinations here. We could be convening on Monday talking about the most successful Winter Games Team USA has ever had, but bookended by just unbelievable disappointment with Lindsey Vogn's injury and culminating with Team USA getting their hearts ripped out again by Team Canada in hockey. So it's like a movie, the Olympics. And sometimes, even though you could sit there for an hour and a half and be engrossed and love it, the way that it ends tends to stick with you. If it's a bad ending to a movie, at best you say it was a great movie until the very end. Or you just flat out say it wasn't a good movie, that you didn't enjoy it because the ending ruined everything. I have to see. I have to see how Sunday goes. If it's an epic game like it was all those years ago in Vancouver and what it was in the Four Nations, I think that I can look at this in its totality and say, no, it was a really good 2 weeks in Italy. But if the U.S. gets demolished on Sunday, that would be a little bit more of a question here. But right now, 10 gold medals, second most of any country behind Norway. And I saw this from Chris with an S on and that's his handle on Twitter. Don't know this guy, but I appreciated his perspective. He brought up the idea, if you look into the medals that Norway has won, and I have the medal table up here right now. Norway has won 3 gold medals in biathlon, 6 in cross-country skiing, 2 in ski jumping, 3 in Nordic combined, which is a skiing event, and 2 in freestyle skiing. So if you're keeping track at home, skiing with a gun, skiing long distances, jumping on skis, having teammates skiing, and doing tricks while skiing. That's how Norway has gotten their 17 golds. The U.S. has won 2 in freestyle skiing, 2 in alpine skiing. They've gotten their fair share of the skiing, but they've also won 2 gold medals in speed skating, 2 in figure skating. Shouts to Alyssa Liu. 1 in bobsleigh, and 1 in hockey. Now, there's no way of doing this. The medal table is the medal table. The one conversation that you have is whether you care more about the number of gold medals or the number of total medals. And right now, it looks like Norway's going to win both. But there are some games where maybe you can win more gold medals and still finish in the total medal count behind some countries. There's no way to weight these. Right? It's just more perception. And it adds to what I'm talking about here. So Norway is going to win the Olympics. Right? Most gold medals, most total medals, they're going to win. But the diversity of the events that Team USA has won in, as opposed to the lack of diversity in the events Norway has won in, does that change your mind a little bit, kind of curb the disappointment of the fact that the United States might finish second to Norway by a wide margin? The fact that we have picked up gold medals in so many different sports, that we have the best female figure skater in the world in Alyssa Liu. We have the best bobsledder in the world, and Alana Myers Taylor. We have the best speed skater in the world. We have the best women's hockey team in the world. And we might have the best men's hockey team in the world when all is said and done. I think that again, you don't weight any of these. A gold medal is a gold medal. A bronze, a silver, they're all medals. But I don't know. I think there's an additional amount of pride that goes into the fact that the U.S. has been winning in so many different events. Not to diminish what's going on with Norway, because they have the best Winter Olympian in the history of the games on their side, and he is unbelievable. Not trying to put an asterisk next to Norway's win. I'm just saying, as you take a step back after Sunday's gold medal game and kind of take in these 2 weeks, I think another thing to add to the mix is just the fact that the U.S. has won in so many different events. And if I can be a little, stoke the fire a little bit, have you checked on how many gold medals Canada has won? That might be something to take into account too when all is said and done. 719-247-1313. Back to wrap up the show after this. I want to get to this tweet that I smashed the like button on this. I love hockey. I do. I'm a self-professed hockey guy. But part of loving something is accepting its flaws even if you complain about them nonstop. And that's kind of the way I go with hockey because I want it to be perfect. It's so close to a perfect sport. One thing is the overtime. And I swear to Zeus, if that game goes into overtime and the gold medal is decided on 3-on-3, just like the women's game was, I am going to lose my freaking mind. Also, because overtime hasn't been kind to the U.S. men's team over the years. So that will make things a little bit nervy Sunday morning. Here's the other aspect of hockey that I would like to be fixed so then it can be perfect in every way. John Michael Lyles, Avs great, member of the altitude crew. If NHL seeding had its way, the U.S. and Canada would have faced each other in the quarterfinals because rivalries. That's the other thing. NHL, do better with the seeding. We'll get back into that when the Avs are back in the – because we'll start to look at the standings a little bit more when the Avs are back in it. And again, I swear to Zeus, if they play Dallas in the first round, I'm going to lose it. 46 years ago, 46 years ago was the last time the U.S. men's hockey team won gold. Now, obviously, this is the first time NHLers have been back in. Not to say that that's been a reason, because if the U.S. can bring their NHLers, so can Canada and all these other teams. But it hasn't been best on best over the last 46 years consecutively, or every 4 years, over 46. But 46 years ago, not a good round number, I'll admit. But the point is, it's been a while since the U.S. has won gold in men's hockey. And 46 years ago, I think you remember, even if you weren't alive, and I wasn't alive at that time, you remember what that is. If I just say the last gold medal the U.S. men's hockey team won in the Olympics was in 1980, you know what that means. You've seen the movie Miracle on Ice. It's been that long. It seems like it's long enough, doesn't it? And to win it at the expense of your fiercest rival would make it all the more sweeter. There's something that Mike Sullivan, the head coach of Team USA, said today that I think is important to keep in mind while you're handicapping Sunday's game, not in a betting way, although that's available to you, but just figuring out how you feel about this matchup and how it might go. Mike Sullivan said today, after the 6-2 win over Slovakia, it was great to see us get off to a fast start, and I thought that was important. Our group continues to take steps forward, and it's a really fun team to coach with an awful lot of personality. One thing that I think you, going into the game, you have to put on the U.S. side of the ledger. the U.S. is getting better as this tournament goes on. Canada is staying the same. And what the same is amazing. Like, don't get me wrong here. But I started the show with this. I thought that maybe the way that Canada looked against Czechia was a byproduct of just not being super locked in, because no matter what you did, you would end up blowing out your opponent. I thought perhaps a switch was flipped by Canada late in that hockey game against Czechia. I don't know that they flipped a switch watching the Finland game today. I think that of the two teams, you cannot say that Canada is progressing towards this game. They have very much, to their credit, stuck with it, and their supreme talent has won them the day. The move by Mitch Marner was crazy good. Crazy good, the winner against Czechia. Nathan MacKinnon's shot today to beat Finland was very McKinnon-esque. Very tight window, and was able to put the puck in there against a good goalie in UC Saros. Like, that's what Canada brings to the table. They are so freaking talented. But I think if Canada plays the way they did in these last couple of games and the U.S. continues the way they're playing, I think the U.S. is going to win. I think Canada will meet up with the team that they can't wait till the very end to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. If Canada and the U.S. start the game on Sunday the same way they have been, I think the U.S. wins. We'll find out. Have a great weekend. Talk Monday.